friends and neighbors, on behalf of the Republican Club here at Heritage Ranch, the Board of Directors, we welcome you, and we send you warm greetings, and we thank you so much for being part of our event tonight. I should say, our sellout packed house event tonight. So when we get to a little later on in the presentation, we'll discuss this entire event. Joan will do that because this event was originally scheduled to be held in February. You know, that's the month we all wish we never saw. But unfortunately we had to cancel, and we have now rescheduled, and we have the same speakers here for the month of May. The issue of COVID is still high on the horizon, and we have a little different presentation tonight on this subject because we think it'll be more meaningful to you. But Joan, like I said, Joan will handle all that. In the meantime, we're going to open our meeting. What we always try to do is get you to see our different board members, so you can put a face and a name together. So tonight, on our Pledge of Allegiance and the Texas State Pledge, we've asked Maureen Everett, who is our historian and our parliamentarian, to deliver that presentation. So,
and if you will stand as you are able for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And our Texas. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Excellent. Can we be seated?
thank you. Well, we're sorry for the confusion there, but we're going to have our invocation now. Clayton Barnes is also one of our officers, and I wanted you to see him in a more spiritual movement. So,
if you would stand, please. We're going to tonight honor in a moment of silence for 3 of our members, 1 who is an active member and 2 that were past members who've passed away since our previous meeting. Please remain standing after a moment of silence, and we'll have the invocation. Let's bow our heads. The 3 that we were remembering are Janet Heavey, who is a current member, Pauline Heffley, who was a past member, and Norma Butler, who is also a past member. At this time, we will bow our heads for the invocation. Father, Lord, we thank you for this time that we can gather together, that we can recognize these people who have been members of our club in the past, and we ask, Father, that you would be with their families, that you would be with them in their time of grief. We thank you, Father, that we are a free country, that we continue to look for our freedom in our everyday life, Father, and we thank you for this club, for continuing to promote freedom, as we all know and as we all wish to have. We thank you, Father, for the beauty of the day. Bless these people who are here and their families. Guide us and direct us, and we ask, Lord, that during this time that you would bless this food to the nourishment of our body. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen.
Okay, just before dinner, we'd like to have our elected officials, if you would, stand up and just come around the aisle here and introduce yourself to our membership. We have 175 members seated here tonight for dinner, so that's 175 votes if you say the right thing. So keep that in mind. All right.
Hello, I'm Ken Logston, council member for Fairview Town Council and Heritage Ranch resident.
Hi, my name is Henry Lester, and I'm still your mayor. I just want to thank the Heritage Ranch Republican Club, your leadership, so many people that are sitting in this room out here help me, getting out the vote, putting signs in your yard, getting signs in other people's yard. I just truly thank you so much. You mean so much to me, and God bless everybody. And by the way, #1 vote getter, where'd Ken go? He got 8 more votes than I did, so there's your man right there.
Good evening, Greg Custer. I'm in seat 2. Thanks to you all. I appreciate your votes as well. I know Ken worked hard to get those, so we appreciate everything you do here at Heritage Ranch. It's wonderful to be a part of this club, and so glad to serve on your behalf. Thanks a lot.
Good afternoon. My name is Sammy Knapp. I'm your neighbor. I'm Precinct 3, Collin County Constable. I live just on the other side. This is Precinct 1. I certainly appreciate everyone's support for me over the past. I'm in my 3rd term, and I'm very proud to serve the community. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Matt Carpenter. I'm running for Collin County Constable, Precinct 1. I'm currently Constable Sammy Knapp's Chief Deputy, and I appreciate Constable Knapp and the confidence he's had in me to lead his department. And I always say professionalism, integrity, and progress has done me well throughout my law enforcement career. And I see that in Constable Sammy Knapp. I want to take that to Precinct 1. And I look at leaders like our own Judge, Chris Hill. Can we have a round of applause for Judge Chris Hill? That's a man who, regardless of what's going on in society, just much like Sammy Knapp, he stands up for what's right. Because certain things don't change. Our political views, our morality, those things don't change. And that's what I want to take to Precinct 1. Thank you very much.
I'm Pam Little, and I'm honored to represent you on the State Board of Education. And at our last meeting, we voted to update our social studies standards. It will be a no to critical race theory only.
Hello everyone, I am not an elected official, but I do serve as the chairman of the Collin County Young Republicans, and I am here this evening to tell you about an event that we will be having right here on June 12th. Yes, thank you for the attention. Thank you. Yeah, I think I prefer this more. So getting back to that, we are welcoming Polina Luna. She is a Air Force veteran, a Florida congressional candidate. She was previously endorsed by President Trump when she ran 2 years ago. She will be our main speaker, but we will also be featuring Texas Senator Bob Hall. Now, the reason that we're organizing this is we want to head into the 2022 midterms even more prepared to engage young Republicans and recruit more of them as volunteers. We have been even more successful with that in the last few years. Just to give you an idea, throughout the entire year of 2020, we, after a lot of counting, we realized that we had knocked on over 15,000 doors. So this county has one of the most effective young Republican chapters in the entire state of Texas. So I would just really appreciate it if you're able to come out. It would help us quite a bit. I have flyers, so it's got all the information on there. You can get tickets at callinyr.com/flagday. Like I said, it's on the flyer. So if you are interested, I would love to talk to you about that afterwards. And thank you, Jack, for giving me a moment to talk about this.
So I just want to say that this young man is the president of 71 young Republicans aged 20 to 40. I would have joined if it had been just another. But you know what, Connor? So we are, you know, most of the people here are my age, and we are fighting and in this club every day for this country. And we look to you and your organization in the future because you are the future. And we're trying to help preserve it and let you all take over, okay? So God bless you. Keep doing the good work. And our last presenter.
Larry Little, Fairview Town Council, and we're working hard to keep Fairview great. We enjoy working for you, and we're going to keep Fairview great.
Okay, we're going to get started with dinner. Sergio and his team are going to bring the dinner out. We just had a large group of our volunteers that went to Austin to meet several of our city officials down there. And throughout dinner, we're going to be showing 29 slides, and they'll just be a rolling slide. But you'll be able to see all of the activities that our people performed and the good things that went on in Austin. This organization survives strictly on volunteers. And this was a volunteer group led by some excellent people. We had we got some terrific results. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But right now, I know you all want to eat, and Ben's going to start the slideshow. So let's enjoy the meeting. I know some of you may be finishing up the last of your dessert, and please continue to do that. We want to get started with our presentation tonight. Just a key point that we would like to make. You heard me say earlier that this organization thrives on volunteers. That's how we operate. So the slides that you've been watching were a group of people right here tonight that went to Austin, did a lot of good work down there, met with the legislature, and I guess we're past enjoy your dinner, but at any rate, that's the kind of things we do. We have a legislative group that is that Ben is the chairman of. And we're looking at all the legislation in Austin that's coming through. We're making sure that we understand how that legislation affects us and the policies and directions that we need here. So I'd like to just show you the outcome of that. So here's a note that we received after the group came back from Candy Noble. And it just says, "Dear Jack, please pass on my gratitude to all of the members of Heritage Ranch Republican Club for coming to Austin and for the gracious certificate of thanks. You all are a blessing to me." Candy Noble, our legislature. So I thought that was a nice note. I wanted to make sure we shared that with each of you. Candy has always been a strong supporter of our club. Next, we have the group that was present there, and you'll see Candy, you'll see Angela Paxton, we have Matt Shaheen, so we have our senators, our representatives. We were able to meet with them as a group and get some key information from them, so that all took place. And now, if I could, I would ask my dear friend Joan, another board member, to come up here and introduce our speakers tonight.
Good evening. Can you hear me? I always say, if people can't hear you, you might as well not even talk, right? Okay. First, before I introduced our very special 3 guests, whom we've been expecting since February, as you know, we had many calls back and forth and messages. Can we do it? Can we not? And then we decided it wasn't going to work. So here we are. But before I talk about that and introduce them, I would like to say something about next month. First of all, we are not in need of topics, because I'm afraid the master of disaster, you know who that is? Who is it? He has provided unlimited subjects for us to talk about, unfortunately. But anyway, so we are going to try to handle as many as we can during the rest of the year. And for the month of June, June 14th, we are going to have, she's in the crowd, would you stand up, please, Pam Little. Pam Little is for those of you that may be new and not know, she is our representative on the State Board of Education. Now, education is a very important thing. First of all, if you want to look at the practical part, our taxes. We pay, don't we, in. We'd like to see a good payout, obviously. But if you listen to any of the news, certainly the more conservative news broadcasts, you'll be hearing a lot of things that you're not real happy about, most probably, like the critical race theory, the Project 1619, and many things that have to do with those subjects. And I only want to say one thing. When I think back of going to school, I'm talking about elementary school, I actually was, I guess, 5 years old. So it was my elementary years when the Second World War began. And I remember how this was a public school, and as I told you before, in the very not so conservative state of New Jersey, that we always had to stand up, take turns reading the Bible every day. That was a given. We would salute the flag, we would sing the Star-Spangled Banner or other patriotic songs. And when you think of what was taught in those days, you know that in the current generations that followed, what we had, a society that was probably shaped and molded by what was taught in the schools, by what was experienced in the schools. But as we go off on different tangents, the same thing is going to happen from now on, or it has happened since the beginning, that society becomes a byproduct of what is taught in the schools. And what we are hearing with the critical race theory, the changes in the way history is presented and how it's presented, it is cause for worry. So we hope to bring out some of those, and Pam even mentioned there'll be a textbook adoption, and I think it's social studies or history, and that is certainly an avenue that can be affected by some of the policies that are being pushed in the society of today. So come on out on the 14th of June, that's why I'm telling you this, and we want to see a good crowd again. We appreciate your enthusiasm, and we hope to keep you enthused. So that's what I wanted to say about that. Today, now we have 3 very fine speakers, and I'd like them to come up, please. Grace Powers, and she is, as you see, the Collin County, one of the epidemiologists. I understand there are a few, yes. And Judge Chris Hill from our county judge, and Bain Brooks, who is a businessman, and I'll tell you a little bit more about him when his turn comes. And have a seat, please. The idea of this program in February was to talk about where we were in February. Well, we're in a different place right now, sorta, right? We're not wearing as many masks, but they're still there. And certainly the numbers are down drastically of COVID and the hospitalizations and deaths, which is a good thing. So we kind of decided to change this a little in keeping with the time, and we're into the reopening of Texas and how things are going and where they're going. So we hope you enjoy the program. So our first each one of them will have 15 minutes. Now, I didn't bring my horn, you know my horn, but I can shut you down. So, about 15 minutes to talk. And then I have a couple of questions that you have submitted, which I'll ask them. So we'll handle one by one so we don't get it all muddy and you forget, well, she was talking about COVID and then he's talking about the business, so we'll handle them one by one, and we hope you enjoy it. I want to tell you just a little bit about Grace Powers. Grace Powers is a Collin County epidemiologist, and I don't know how many there are a few, right? 4, 5? Oh, wow, okay. And so she works at the Collin County Health Department. She began in epidemiology in a program as an intern. I'm going back a few years, conducting surveillance and community education programs for the Zika virus. Different virus, right? She began her work full-time as an epidemiologist in Collin County in 2018, and so she has marked her 3rd anniversary. Grace completed her undergraduate degree in public health at Austin College in 2017, and she very recently obtained her master's degree from the Texas Tech University. Originally, Grace was from Corpus Christi, but I hope she's feeling right at home now in McKinney, right? So let's give a very warm welcome to Grace Powers. Grace, you want to just read? Yeah, but you have to put it close.
I guess I'm a little strong. Really close. Is this good?
Really close.
Really close. How's this, everyone? Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for having me tonight. I'm here to talk about something that I'm so passionate about, public health and vaccines. So I'm very excited to be here and feel very welcomed by you all. So I wanted to start off with some good news about where we are right now with our vaccine rollout. So I checked the numbers right before I came. To date, we've given almost 900,000 doses of the vaccine here in Collin County. So looking at our age range, for individuals 12 and older, we just recently rolled out vaccines for those 12 to 15, we have fully vaccinated 47.8% of our population. This puts us in 9th place out of all 254 counties in Texas. So you can say that Collin County is doing a really great job, and we couldn't have done it with all of our community members, our doctors, and our partners who helped us get this rollout out so quickly and so efficiently. Looking further at our age demographic, for those 65 and older, 73.9% of that population has been fully vaccinated, which once again puts us in 9th place out of 254 counties. So I would say that that's a really awesome accomplishment and definitely a big step in the right direction to return to normalcy. Moving forward, we strive to focus on our vulnerable populations, those who might not have a ride to get to our vaccine appointments or internet connection to sign up for a slot. We really want to focus on those individuals to make sure that everybody who wants a vaccine can get it. As of right now, our vaccine rollout is just as that. If you want a vaccine, you can get it. The supply is plentiful. There are many walk-in clinics, and we're very happy for that new milestone. So before I get into more information about the vaccines, I kind of wanted to give everybody an idea of what I do every day as an epidemiologist. A lot of the times, if you've heard me speak before, I'm sorry, I always say this joke, but it gets me every time. When I tell people I'm an epidemiologist, they say, "Oh, great, can you look at this freckle on my back?" Because they think I'm a dermatologist. But even my parents, who I've explained to multiple times about what I do every day, don't quite understand, because before the pandemic, we were really in the woodworks, more on the background of all of our disease investigations. So I wanted to kind of differentiate something that we learn a lot in school is the medical model versus the public health model. The medical model, I'll do a story here. If you are a 5-year-old and you have chickenpox, you'll go to the doctor will test you or clinically diagnose, oh, this is chickenpox. They'll give you some antiviral medication, send you on your way, let you know what to look for if you need to go to the emergency room. What you don't get to see is that 5th grade's pre-K class that we now need to go in, make sure that they don't get chickenpox, make sure that their pregnant teacher gets their vaccine so their baby doesn't have complications. There's a lot of things on the back end after that patient is released from the hospital or released from the doctor's office that we do every day. So this was something that was new to a lot of people when we first started the pandemic, didn't quite understand contact tracing and the point of it, but that's what we do every day. We have 86 different diseases that we work on, ranging from Zika, which is one of my favorites, to stomach bugs, whooping cough, varicella. We work on it all. Yes, my mom also laughs when I say my favorite disease because I should not celebrate people getting sick, but it is quite interesting. If you'd like to hear about mosquitoes, meet me in the back. And so with vaccines and with COVID-19 in general, it's a super broad topic. So I figured with my introduction here, I would frame it more of a Q&A with myself, just so that we could cover as many topics as possible, as broadly as possible. So one of the first questions that I've been getting recently is, why are we putting more of an emphasis on prevention rather than treatment? So looking back at that medical model, treatment is more that doctor's scope of work. They are figuring out how to treat their singular patient, while we are on the woodworks trying to figure out how to protect the community as a whole. Now, one of the classes that I took in my master's degree was the ethics of public health, and something that they really harp into us is helping the most amount of people in the quickest way that we can, in the most ethical way that we can. As of right now, for COVID-19, the way that we can do that is to implement control measures for prevention. So that includes our vaccines, our masks, our social distancing. And some of those, as we learn with the science are some more important than others. As of right now, our focus is mainly on the vaccines. Another question I get is, should I get the vaccine? Should my grandma get the vaccine? Should my child get the vaccine? CDC recommends if you're eligible, so if you're older than 12 and don't have contraindications, you should get the vaccine when you're able to. Here in Collin County, everyone is able to. We have an ample supply. So I recommend speaking with your doctor if you have concerns, and once you are able, go out there and get it. Some things that people are worried about are side effects. So with any medication, any vaccine, there is a risk for side effects, complications, one-off scenarios. So that happens if you take aspirin, or if you get your chickenpox shot, or if you get your COVID vaccine. It's important that you educate yourself and speak with your doctor. For example, we had a huge uproar in the media recently on the blood clots associated with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. If you have a Johnson & Johnson vaccine appointment, or if that's the vaccine that you choose to get, and you're predisposed to getting a blood clot, talk to your doctor and see if maybe you should choose another option, or if they have strategies for before your appointment that can lower your risk or even forego all the way. Of course, everybody is different, and it's very important to speak with your doctor if you have any concern at all. Another question I get, and this one makes me laugh, especially with our last week, why are recommendations changing so often? And let me tell you, I agree. So with science, we have to go with what we know. And so what we knew with COVID in the beginning was nothing. It was a new disease, given the name, novel coronavirus. Novel means new. But what we did know was coronaviruses in general. I'm not sure if any of you guys remember in the early 2000s, the SARS outbreak. Anybody remember that? This is the same type of virus as that. So we were able to take what we knew from that situation and mold our control measures. So we knew that it was a respiratory disease, so masks would probably help. We knew that respiratory diseases are good for washing hands, so we took that and we rolled with it. We're always erring on the side of caution until we're able to prove what we want to do is the right thing to do. So now, with our recommendations last week from the CDC saying that vaccinated persons do not have to wear a mask indoors or outdoors, that came as a shock to a lot of people, including myself. I had almost thought that the mask was almost a comfort item. It was something that I knew I was protecting myself. But now we know that if you're vaccinated, you're protected. And so with that science, we're able to grow and change and return to normalcy. I do suspect in the coming weeks that change will happen quite rapidly. Recently, there have been lots of statements from CDC and also the President's Administration's Health Council that more science is becoming available, and we're very excited to see how that's going to impact our world once again to return to normalcy. Another question that we get that often makes me chuckle is, what have we learned? Everything. So we really did start with almost a blank slate here, and I'm really proud of what our scientists have done here. It's really important that we stick to the science, and I know I'm coming back to this a lot, but numbers, they really are cut and dry, and it's very comforting to me to know that there is evidence behind the decisions that we're making. The next question that I get a lot is, are we close to herd immunity? What is herd immunity? So first I'll explain it, and this is how my public health professor explained it to me. Some of my colleagues think that this is a little silly, but it makes sense to me. So if you have a field of sheep and a wolf comes in and is trying to attack a sheep, well, if all the sheep get very strong and they're able to fight off the wolf, they'll be okay. If there's one really weak sheep, that wolf is going to try and attack the weak sheep. But if the strong sheep are able to stand around it and protect it from the wolf, then it's safe. Even though he wasn't able to get strong himself, he had others around him protecting him. Now, if everybody turns into a weak sheep, the wolf has many options. So we have to make sure that there's enough strong sheep to protect the weak sheep. So I really encourage you all, I know that that's a silly explanation, to go out and be the strong sheep of your community, to stand around those who cannot get the vaccine, those who cannot protect themselves against the disease for any reason, whether they have underlying medical conditions or other types of contraindications to the vaccine, so that we can be the one to stand around them. Science is still figuring out what threshold that is for us. So some doctors are saying that that threshold is 50% vaccinated, some are saying 70%. We don't quite know at this point. So on our end, on the public health side, we want to keep going strong until we're able to figure that out. Another big question that I have a true answer for is, are we going to need a booster shot? So currently there is a clinical trial for the Moderna vaccine for a booster shot. We don't quite know how long between or what this vaccine will consist of, but I do know it's in the works, and with my opinion, I do believe that it will be something that is in our future. I can't say that 100%, but given the evidence that we're seeing through these clinical trials, I do believe it's going to be something that we see in our future. So another thing is just common misconceptions in general. Does the vaccine cause infertility? Is there a microchip in it? Some of them are sillier than others, but some of them, can cause great concern, especially if you are someone who hopes to have babies one day or is concerned about having foreign matter in your body. CDC has actually come out with a section on their website called Science Briefs. I really recommend, if you have any questions at all, to look at that Science Briefs portion. It takes our scientific research that we're getting and kind of compiles it into an easy to understand one-pager, and it's really helped me, especially when I have family members or even my best friend who is trying to get pregnant right now, had all of these concerns, and we were able to point her in the right direction so that she can make decisions for herself with her doctor. Next, why do children need to get the vaccine if they are at a lower risk? So low risk is not no risk. Unfortunately, some children have other effects that we don't have a higher risk for. One being multi-inflammatory syndrome in children. So that's when you have multiple organs having issues. Unfortunately, we do see a few children hospitalized with this. Also, they have a higher risk of long COVID, and that's where you have your symptoms last longer than a month. So we do want to protect our children. They can still get sick. They can still infect others, although they may not be hospitalized or they may not pass away. There is that risk still there. One last thing that I wanted to look into is the difference between efficacy and effectiveness. So right now we're getting lots of questions, does this vaccine work? As of right now, we know a lot about the efficacy. And efficacy tells us what is going on in our clinical trials, in a controlled setting with a controlled number of people, cases and controls. Right now, we really want to look into the effectiveness. How is it working in a real world situation, and how can we ensure that it gets better? And with that, thank you for having me, and I'll be happy to take your questions.
I have a few questions for you. Actually, Grace did a good job in answering some of the questions. I don't know if I heard this because it is specific. I think many of us, or a number of us, have friends that really could get the vaccine, but they're not doing it for unknown reasons, really, or at least they're not really being explained. And that, I'm talking about, if you have been vaccinated, then is it true that you cannot give the virus to someone or be a carrier or receive it, except for the 5% or 4% or whatever percent?
That's a really good question, and before I answer it, I would like to go back to our friends who are not getting the vaccine. I always will respect someone's personal choice and what them and their doctor have decided to do for them. If you identify one of your friends says, I'm not getting it, there's a chip in it, then, point them in the right direction, tell them what's going on. Or if they say, oh, I'm trying to have a baby, I'm afraid it'll cause infertility, point them in the right direction. So show them reputable sources. A lot of the times, the media might be a game of telephone, and one person says one thing and then it turns into another, and by the end of it, we're all starting the zombie apocalypse. So with that, I just really encourage you all to be advocates for yourself. Having others being vaccinated benefits you as well, so be an advocate. As for the 5%, I'll go back to our effectiveness versus efficacy. As we learn more about the vaccine in real world situations, that percentage does ebb and flow. It's never going to be a blanket 5%. Just because people's chemical makeup is so different, we won't be able to put a direct number on it. I will say that the clinical trials that are looking at the real world situations are showing promising results that are very, very similar to the trial results.
And another question, we realize that it's hard to predict long-term effects because the vaccine is so new. But having said that, can you speak about, how to deal with long-term effects, if that's a question in your mind?
My original thought with that, like you said, it's really hard to tell what the long-term effects are going to be. We're only a year and a half into this pandemic, so we don't quite know what's going to happen 10 years down the road. I will say there are individuals who have longer complications due to their hospital stay, whether that was a blood clot that they got or residual issues within their breathing passages from being on a ventilator, other things like that, heart problems from being on ECMO, which is a type of life support. So there are some things that are directly related to their hospital stay or the symptoms that they had, but we're not quite sure what will happen 10 years down the road.
Okay. And I have a question about a possible surge, or if it is not likely. But the first part of the question is, do you know what caused the surge in India, and should we expect such a surge here?
Right. That's also a very good question. Unfortunately, India is being hit pretty hard right now. I did some research beforehand, just looking at the difference in the vaccine rates. So on the Johns Hopkins vaccine data tracker, you can see what percentage of each population has been vaccinated. So if you think of the United States, where hundreds of millions of people have been vaccinated, over in India, only 12 million people have been vaccinated for such a dense population. And that really opens up the doors for variants and spread within the community. So hopefully, if we're able to stay on top of our control measures, we won't have another surge.
Is there a threat of new strains for which we would be vulnerable? Are we expecting a winter surge?
So I'll start with the winter surge question. So this was something that I actually learned when I started working at Collin County. My parents always taught me, if you go to bed with wet hair, you're going to get the flu. Because you're too cold. If you stay out in the snow too long, you're going to get the flu because you're too cold. So actually, the cold weather doesn't have much to do with how the virus reacts. It's more that we're all just cooped up inside together, snuggling up on the couch instead of outside playing and social distancing. With the variants, I will say that we have had variants circulating in Texas. It is something that we are keeping our eye very close on and making sure that it doesn't spread any further. Something that might really encourage friends to get the vaccine. So while you may get COVID and have some sort of immunity for a few days or a few months after, you don't have that protection against variants. As of right now, our clinical trials are showing very promising results in the vaccine protecting against these variants. So it is possible, it is happening, and we're hoping to stop it more quickly.
So you are saying that there are signs that whatever vaccine we got, which of the ones that are out, that they could be protecting against those too, but nothing is absolutely certain. Is that what it is?
Correct. Nothing's absolutely certain, and something that is very surprising is there's lots and lots of variants. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but there's B117 from the UK, there's one that's from South Africa, one that originated in California even. So it is a possibility, and we're hoping that the vaccine has a more broader response.
Well, I thank you very much, but I'll ask you before we say thank you to you, if you're not in a hurry, and any of our people still have more questions, could you sort of hang around a little bit and
Sure, absolutely.
welcome them to come up? Yes.
I love talking about nerdy things and getting other people passionate about diseases and the prevention of them. So if you want to talk about mosquitoes or chickenpox or Ebola even, I'm here for you.
Chiggers or anything else.
Exactly.
Thank you very, very, very much, Chris. Thank you. Our next speaker, you know, I feel like I compare introducing Judge Hill to introducing Santa Claus. Everybody knows who Santa Claus is. Well, it makes us feel everyone knows who Chris Hill is because he's been around and he's been here. But I want to tell you a few things because we have a number of new people that have moved into the state, certainly into the area, and they may not know the famous Judge Chris Hill. So here is my introduction for Chris. Well, Chris, before he became county judge, he was our county commissioner, Precinct 3, and that was from 2012 to 2016. And he became our judge after that. But Chris is a 6th generation native Texan. He always, well, I've read this many times, and many of us who moved here more recently, that's kind of very impressive. Not only that, he's a 4th generation native of Cullen County, so he knows this county very well. And his great-great-grandfather was a Cullen County farmer. I think that tells you that he's thoroughly familiar with our county. As far as his prior, he was previously an executive pastor, a corporate accountant and controller, extensive financial and organization leadership. And for those of you who wonder, what does this judge do? You know, maybe he can give you a sentence or two and tell you, because he doesn't have a court like many of our judges that we elect as judges. But one last thing about his education. He has obtained a Bachelor of Political Science degree from Texas A&M University, a Master's in Information Management at UTD, a Master of Business Administration from Webster University, and a Master of Pastoral Leadership from Columbia Biblical Seminary. So he certainly has some good credentials to lead as judge of Cullen County. You're on.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you everyone for being here. And for those of you who are new, you learned tonight, just as I did, that I'm now the famous Chris Hill. So that's fantastic. And we'll figure out the Santa Claus part later. But I'm grateful to be with you tonight. In fact, I'm very impressed. First, before I start talking about our topic, I'm so impressed with your group and with your activity and how focused you are here in Cullen County. And I appreciate the comments earlier for Connor, Mr. Barron, and the Young Republican group, one of the strongest young Republican groups in the state of Texas. But quite frankly, you are perhaps the strongest young at heart Republican group in the state of Texas. And I am grateful for this club, and I'm grateful for how hard you work to make sure that you've got conservative folks at the city level, the county level, and even working at the state level. I appreciate that. Well, the other group that I really appreciate are the folks that I work with in Cullen County, like Grace, like Ms. Powers. I would say that I already had an appreciation for all of our employees, our elected officials, our department heads, and the talented folks who worked on all of our different teams. But each new issue that comes up has given me a newer appreciation for those folks that are so talented that work on our teams. And as Joan mentioned, I used to have the privilege of being your county commissioner. That was the best job I ever had, because I didn't know that when Judge Self retired, he was just going to let everything go sideways. He didn't tell me what 2019 and 2020 was going to look like. And I've gotten on to him a couple times and said, hey. And he then, of course, immediately said, I left it in good shape. That's all on you. But now, as we've been through the last couple of years together, I appreciate so much the talented folks who work on our Collin County team, and they're critical to me in the decisions that I have to make in leading our community and in serving you as your county judge. As Grace talked about really the science part and the medical part, I'm going to stay away from that. It's fun for me to pretend like I'm a doctor and give medical advice, but my wife who's with me tonight, Laura Hill, if you'll give her a round of applause. She is a nurse, and she keeps me straight, and she tells me, do not pretend like you know medicine. So I'm going to stay over here on the policy side and really talk about the decisions that came to my desk this last year, the things that we had to work our way through for the first time here in quite frankly, in our country in many, many years. I'd like to look back across some of those decisions and tell you what was in my head, and then I'd be happy to answer some of your questions if I miss any of the points that you'd like me to talk about. But looking back over a year ago in March of 2020, we were hearing, you remember this, we were hearing about the coronavirus in other places, and we were hearing about it overseas, and then all of a sudden we heard about that first case that's here in the United States. And then we heard about the first case in Texas, which was down in the Harris County, Houston area. And then I got that fateful call from our Director of Public Health that one fateful morning. And she told me, we've now had our first case here in Collin County. That was the second case in Texas. It was the first case in North Texas. And that began what was for many, many months, just an incredible focus on this new issue, coronavirus, and all the implications. And even then, that day, we didn't understand all that was ahead for us here at the county or here in our community. The gentleman that was the first case, he had been traveling over to California and came back and then found out that he was sick, and some of the members of his household got it and the other members of his household did not get it. All of them did recover and they're fine, but then of course we began to hear about other cases. And very quickly we had to make some decisions about what to do. If you remember in March 2020, the biggest questions across the entire nation, across the world really, were how contagious is this virus? We didn't know the contagion rate, and we didn't know how deadly it was going to be. Really, what is the mortality rate? We're waiting to learn, and now we know a lot more. But back then, it was a real question for us. In those early days, and going back to even when I first started as judge, we had frequent conversations, the 4 county judges here in North Texas, myself and Collin, my counterparts, Andy Eads in Denton County, and Clay Jenkins in Dallas County, and Glenn Whitley over in Tarrant County. We speak often on the phone and have meetings together, regional meetings together. But during those days, we were speaking quite a bit as we're all trying to decide, well, how are we going to respond to this? And really, you know this next part of the story because it was probably the most publicized back in early 2020, but how Dallas County decided to respond and how I decided to lead us were quite different. It was a drastic difference between those two. And I'll just walk you through that. As I'm on the phone with Clay Jenkins and we're talking about how we're going to respond, and he let me know that he was going to lock his county down for, at that point, what he said was going to be 12 weeks. And he was going to send folks home and close non-essential businesses. We really wrestled with that on the phone, and I just had to let Clay know, I don't think I'm going to be doing what you're going to be doing. And I'm still going to spend a couple of days still thinking this through, but I don't think I'm on the same page with you. And for me, there was that real question of what about the medicine, what about the science, the unknowns that we had back then. And there was a real sense for me of just, I need to pray through this, and I'm sure hopeful that these worst case scenarios don't come to pass. But even in spite of the science and the medicine and knowing that we needed to take some important measures there, I had 2 other very important issues that were in my mind that I had to balance as your county judge. Now the state law gives me certain authority in an emergency to make certain decisions that affect all of us, 1.1 million of us. But the 2 other competing interests that have always been right at the forefront for me have always been liberty and economy. And there's a lot of folks who did who sent a lot of critical messages out saying that we shouldn't be focused on economy. We shouldn't be worried about 401ks, and we shouldn't be worried about country club memberships. But they lose the point. We're not worried about all of the if you will, the stock market part of the economy. We need to be, but most pressing, of course, is how are moms and dads going to continue to put food on the table? in the midst of something that's going to be going on for the next year, a challenge like this. And if we send, and Clay and I had this conversation, Judge Jenkins, if we send all of our employees home for weeks and weeks on end, how are they going to continue to meet those needs? So that's the economy side of that, which must be given must be given attention in that equation. But even more is the liberty side, and here's what I mean. And I got a lot of critical messages about liberty too, and you know, how dare you put that above the public health and safety. But this is the key point. The day that I have, or any elected official, has the authority to tell you, you may no longer work. You may no longer provide for yourself. You may no longer work. The day that we do that and we say, you're not essential, and you go home and there is no more job for you, we've lost something. And that was very critical to me. I appreciate that, thank you. That's very critical in this equation, making sure that we balance that. And so, if you were here in March of 2020, if you heard my message, it was that, quite frankly, number one, and this is the key point for me, every business is essential. Every worker is essential, every job is essential. Now, quite frankly, your job might not be essential to me, and my job might not be essential to any of you. But every family who depends on mother or father's job, that job is essential. It's critical to that family, to the health and wellness of that family. And without the financial means to take care of the family, we then have to deal with the health and wellness issues of the real sense of how do I provide for my family in a health-wise if I don't have the means by which to do so. So that was a real important key for me. Economy and liberty in the midst of trying to take care of health and safety of our community. So my message was, first of all, every business is essential. And we're just going to lay that marker down. Now that didn't mean that every business was on equal footing from a health and safety standpoint, because there were some businesses that were classified by other elected officials as non-essential. But that business might really have only had 2 or 3 employees in a large warehouse. And even though they were non-essential, why couldn't they work? They could all socially distance and stay apart from each other. They could work in a safe and healthy manner. But if we just decide arbitrarily they're non-essential, then they weren't allowed to, or they would face trouble if they did. That seems illogical to me. On the other hand, you had businesses that were deemed essential that really were going to struggle to find a way to work safe. Now, mind you, this is work safe March 2020, when we didn't know the contagion rate and we didn't know the mortality rate. And so my message back in March was every business is essential, and every person in this county has a duty to do what they need to keep themselves healthy and well, and to keep their neighbors